Jealous sister sabotaged my relationship, so I exposed her cheating at her proposal party. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here we are. 3 years ago, my sister Sandra, who's 26, did something that completely turned my life upside down. I've been plotting my revenge ever since, and now that I've finally pulled it off, I find myself reflecting on everything that's happened. Let me take you back to 3 years ago. I was in a fantastic relationship with my girlfriend Kathy. We had been together for about a year, and I was even considering proposing. Kathy was incredibly smart and funny, and we connected in a way I had never experienced before. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party and hit it off instantly, chatting for hours about everything from our favorite hobbies to our dreams for the future. Kathy was a pediatric nurse, passionate about her job and always sharing hilarious stories about the kids she worked with. I was working as a software engineer, and even though she often didn't understand the technical details, she listened patiently as I rambled on about my projects. No relationship is perfect, but Kathy and I were committed to making things work. We even began discussing moving in together. Meanwhile, my sister Sandra had always been the golden child in our family. Whatever she wanted, she got. Growing up, that caused a lot of friction between us, but as adults we managed to keep things relatively cordial. Sandra, 2 years younger than me, was the family star, valedictorian, Ivy League graduate, and she landed a high-paying job right out of college. I was the underachiever, having taken a few years to find my footing. I was happy for her, but it was hard not to feel overshadowed. Family dinners often turned into celebrations of Sandra's latest achievements, while mine barely registered. When I introduced Kathy to my family, I was nervous but hopeful they would see how happy she made me. At first, they seemed to like her. But then, out of the blue, Kathy broke up with me, tearfully accusing me of cheating with multiple women. I was devastated. I had never cheated on her. When I asked where she got such a wild idea, she revealed that Sandra had shown her proof. Text messages, photos, everything. I was heartbroken and confused. I tried reaching out to Kathy countless times, leaving voicemails and even showing up at her workplace, but she wanted nothing to do with me. After a few weeks of misery, I finally pieced it all together. Sandra had fabricated the evidence, using photo editing software to create fake text conversations and manipulating innocent photos of me with female friends. When I confronted her, she shrugged it off, saying I was getting too happy and it annoyed her. That's when I realized just how spiteful my sister could be. She had ruined my relationship simply because she couldn't stand to see me happy. I was furious, but Sandra just laughed it off, and as usual, my parents took her side. They insisted I must have done something to provoke her and dismissed my claims. That's when I decided I couldn't let this go unpunished. I wanted Sandra to pay for what she had done, but I knew I had to be patient and wait for the right moment. For the next 3 years, I played the part of the supportive brother, even spending more time with Sandra and her boyfriend, Thomas. He was a great guy, successful, kind, and thoughtful, everything Sandra supposedly wanted. Yet, I could see the moments when she treated him poorly when she thought no one was watching. During this time, I focused on my career and even got a promotion, earning more than I ever had before. I dated a bit, but I struggled to trust anyone fully after what happened with Kathy. About 6 months ago, I noticed Sandra acting strangely, always on her phone, smiling at texts and making excuses to go out. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. She was having an affair. I didn't confront her. Instead, I started gathering evidence. I know it sounds a bit obsessive, but I needed proof. I managed to capture photos of her with another guy, screenshots of their conversations, everything. And the guy she was cheating with? He was a colleague named Robert, and he was everything Thomas wasn't. Thomas was the kind of guy who was brash and arrogant, convinced he was God's gift to women. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at the messages Sandra and Robert exchanged, where they mocked him as boring and predictable. It honestly made me sick. Just last week, Thomas excitedly told me he was planning to propose to Sandra. He even showed me the ring. It was stunning, a family heirloom from his grandmother. He was so full of hope, sharing all his grand plans for the proposal and their future together. That's when I knew I had to do something. When the day of the proposal arrived, Thomas had organized a surprise party with all their friends and family. He was about to get down on one knee when I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. I revealed everything, showed them evidence of Sandra's affair, I explained how she'd destroyed my relationship 3 years ago out of spite and how this was just karma catching up with her. The room fell silent. Thomas looked stunned, and Sandra was in tears, screaming at me to stop. But I kept going, detailing everything. Photos of Sandra and Robert leaving a hotel, their mocking texts about Thomas, and even a voicemail where Sandra gushed about how much better Robert was than him. After that, Thomas left, completely crushed. Sandra was sobbing, alternating between begging him to come back and yelling at me. Our parents rushed in, trying to calm everyone down, but it was chaos. Later, Sandra showed up at my apartment, a total wreck. She cried and demanded I fix things, claiming I'd ruined her life and that Thomas was the best thing that ever happened to her. I just laughed, telling her now she knew how it felt. "Why would you do this to me? I'm your sister," she kept repeating. I fired back, reminding her of how she'd ruined my relationship with Kathy, lying and making her think I was cheating. Sandra looked confused and said, "That was years ago. I thought you were over it." That's when I lost it, calling her out for being selfish and cruel, a product of our parents' favoritism. I told her she deserved everything happening to her. She stormed out in tears, and I haven't heard from her since. Now my parents are blowing up my phone, leaving voicemails about how I've torn the family apart. They want me to apologize to Sandra and fix things with Thomas. It's been a few days, and while I do feel bad for Thomas, part of me thinks Sandra finally got what she deserved. Asterisk, asterisk. Update. Asterisk, asterisk. It's been about a month since all of this went down, and things have only gotten more complicated. The fallout from the failed proposal has been intense. My family is in total disarray. My parents are furious, alternating between guilt-tripping me and threatening to cut me off if I don't apologize to Sandra. I've mostly ignored them, but did respond once, saying I wouldn't apologize. That silenced them for a bit, but they started up again after a few days. As for Sandra, she's been eerily quiet since her meltdown. I've heard from mutual friends that she's been a wreck, barely leaving her apartment and not even showing up for work. Any guilt I might have felt about her situation vanished when I remembered how she laughed about ruining my relationship with Kathy. Speaking of Kathy, about 2 weeks after the incident, I got a surprising message from her. She'd heard what happened and wanted to talk, so we met for coffee. It was strange seeing Kathy again after 3 years. She looked mostly the same. "I owe you an apology," she said, admitting she should have listened to me back then and given me a chance to explain. I was taken aback. Kathy explained that after hearing about Sandra and Thomas, she remembered how adamant Sandra was about my supposed cheating and how she had all this evidence. Now, looking back, it didn't sit right with her. We talked for hours, catching up on each other's lives. She filled me in on her job and her dating life, while I kept my feelings about her departure to myself. As we were about to leave, Kathy hesitated and asked if we could try again. I still had feelings for her, but I knew it wasn't the right time. I gently told her it wasn't a good idea, and we parted with a hug and a promise to stay in touch, though I wasn't sure if that would happen. Then, about a week after the failed proposal, I got a text from Thomas asking to meet up. I was surprised, but agreed to see him at a local bar. When I arrived, he was already there, looking rough, dark circles under his eyes, an unkempt beard. He barely looked up when I sat down. "I owe you a thank you," he said, followed by, "and a punch in the face." I braced myself, but he just sighed and took another swig of his beer. "I'm really glad you told me about Sandra," Thomas said. "But did you have to do it in front of everyone?" I felt awful and sincerely apologized. I had been so focused on getting back at Sandra that I hadn't considered how it would impact him. Thankfully, Thomas accepted my apology, and we sat in silence for a while, each of us lost in our thoughts. As the night went on, Thomas opened up about his relationship with Sandra. He revealed he had been planning to propose for months, but kept delaying it because something felt off. He admitted that part of him was relieved to find out about her cheating before making that commitment. We talked more, and he asked about my history with Sandra. I shared everything, the favoritism from our parents and how she sabotaged my relationship with Kathy. Thomas was horrified. He had no idea who Sandra really was. By the end of the night, an unexpected friendship had formed between us. We exchanged numbers and promised to keep in touch. Over the next few weeks, we started hanging out regularly, grabbing drinks and watching games. We discussed everything. One night, Thomas came to my apartment looking upset. "Sandra's been trying to contact me," he said. "She's been calling, texting, and even showed up at my work begging for another chance." I asked him what he was planning to do. He admitted he was conflicted. They had been together for 2 years, but he knew he couldn't trust her again after all the lies. The next day, he met Sandra for coffee and called me afterward. He told me he ended it for good. He stood firm, telling her that her cheating wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice she kept making. Sandra didn't take it well. She sobbed, lashed out, and even tried to blame me for poisoning Thomas against her. But he maintained that I had only revealed the truth. Afterward, Sandra spiraled, posting cryptic messages on social media, clearly trying to play the victim. Our parents predictably sided with her, pressuring me to apologize and help her win Thomas back. When I refused, they threatened to cut me out of their will. I told them to go ahead. I'd rather keep my integrity than their money. This whole situation made me realize just how toxic my family is. I've started seeing a therapist, which has been helpful for setting boundaries and dealing with their guilt trips. Work became a distraction. I poured myself into a big project, working long hours to keep my mind off everything. My boss noticed and hinted at a promotion if I kept it up. As for my love life, it's been non-existent since all this. A few friends tried to set me up, but I'm not ready. I need to focus on myself for now. Maybe someday I'll be open to trusting someone again. But for now, I'm okay being alone. Thomas seems to be doing better. He started hitting the gym regularly, saying he needs to work out his frustrations. He even signed up for cooking classes, something Sandra always discouraged him from pursuing. It's great to see him focusing on his own happiness. My relationship with my parents remains strained, and I'm not sure if it will ever fully recover. As for Sandra, I hear she's still a mess. She's taken a leave of absence from work, and rumors suggest she might lose her job. I can't say I'm not satisfied about that. Thomas and I are planning a getaway trip next month. It'll be nice to escape the drama for a bit. In the end, I don't regret exposing Sandra's affair. Thank you all for listening to my story. If anything significant happens, I'll update you, but for now, I'm signing off to live my life on my own terms, finally free from Sandra's shadow. Asterisk, asterisk. Final update, asterisk, asterisk. It's been a year since my last update, and I feel ready to share how things have turned out. A lot has changed, and I'm finally closing this chapter of my life. First, let's talk about Sandra. After her affair was exposed and her relationship with Thomas ended, things got worse for her before they improved. She lost her job partly due to her extended absence and the rumors about her personal life affecting her professional reputation. For a while, she moved back in with our parents, who coddled her and treated her like a victim, blaming me for ruining her life. But even Sandra couldn't keep up the facade forever. About 3 months after moving home, she had a massive blowout with our parents. Under the pressure of their expectations, she finally snapped and confessed everything she had done to me and Kathy years ago. Our parents were shocked and forced to confront who Sandra really was. It wasn't pretty. There was a lot of yelling and tears. In the end, Sandra moved out. Last I heard, she's living in a small apartment across the city, working a retail job and attending therapy. As for my parents, they initially tried to reach out to me after Sandra's confession. At first, I ignored them. I was still hurt and angry about feeling like second best for so long. Eventually, after some encouragement from my therapist, I agreed to meet with them. It was awkward, filled with apologies, tears, and uncomfortable silences. They admitted they had been wrong and failed me as a parent in many ways. I appreciated their honesty, but I made it clear that repairing our relationship would take more than one conversation. Over the past year, we've been slowly rebuilding. It's not perfect. Old habits sometimes resurface, but we're trying. They've started showing a genuine interest in my life and career, and I'm learning to open up to them again. It's still a work in progress, but progress nonetheless. Let's talk about Thomas. We went ahead with that camping trip we had been planning, and it turned out to be exactly what we both needed. A week in the wilderness, away from phones and the internet, gave us a real chance to clear our heads. Thomas is doing well these days. He dove into those cooking classes I mentioned, and it turns out he has a real knack for it. He's even dreaming about opening his own restaurant someday. On the romantic front, he started dating again about 6 months ago. His new girlfriend, Lisa, seems like a fantastic match for him. Down to earth and genuinely kind. I'm really happy for him. Thomas and I are still great friends. We get together regularly for beers and to catch a game. It's nice to have someone who knows my whole story and with whom I can be completely honest. He's become like a brother to me, the sibling relationship I always wished I had with Sandra. As for my career, I finally got that promotion my boss hinted at. The extra responsibilities have been challenging, but in a good way. They've pushed me to grow and step out of my comfort zone. I'm proud of what I've accomplished and excited about where my career is headed. Now, about my love life. After spending some time focusing on myself and healing, I've started dating again. I met a woman named Nora at a work conference about 4 months ago, and we hit it off immediately. We bonded over our shared love of obscure sci-fi novels and terrible puns. Nora knows about my past with Sandra and Kathy. I was nervous about sharing my history, worried she'd see it as too much baggage, but she's been incredibly understanding. She's helped me realize that what happened wasn't my fault and that I deserve love and happiness just like anyone else. Things are still new between us, but we're taking it slow and building a solid foundation of trust and open communication. Regarding Kathy, we've kept our relationship friendly but distant. We occasionally like each other's posts on social media or send quick birthday texts, but that's about it. We've both accepted that our time as a couple has passed, but I'm glad we managed to clear the air and find some closure. As for Sandra, we haven't spoken directly in months. The last time we interacted was at a family dinner our parents insisted on having. It was awkward and tense, with Sandra alternating between trying too hard to act normal and shooting me resentful looks. We both agreed it's best to keep our distance for now. Maybe someday we'll have a real conversation about everything that happened, but we're not there yet. Looking back over the past 4 years, it's hard to believe how much has changed. The anger and bitterness that consumed me for so long have faded. While I still think Sandra's actions were terrible and don't regret exposing her affair, I'm in a much better place now. As I write this final update, I'm sitting in my new apartment, finally moved out of that place filled with memories of Sandra's betrayal. I'm looking out at the sunset, and Nora is coming over later for a movie night. Tomorrow, I'll meet Thomas and Emma for brunch. Life isn't perfect, it's never going to be, but it's good. Really good. To everyone who followed my journey from the beginning, thank you. Your support, advice, and even criticisms have helped me navigate this challenging time in my life. I hope that, by sharing my story, I've been able to help some of you as well. If nothing else, I hope it shows that even when things seem darkest, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow.